Today, we're excited to announce the alpha release of Vite Plus, the new unified toolchain and entry point to web application development. Vite Plus is there to manage your runtime, package manager, and front-end toolchain, and is now available fully open source under the MIT license. Let's try it out. To get started, we have to install the Vite Plus binary through a very simple shell command or PowerShell if you're on Windows, and after setting up Vite Plus, you are just up and ready. To check, you can type vp help to see all the commands that are available. Now that Vite Plus is up and ready, we start creating a project, and we can do this by writing vp create. We have a couple options now to create a monorepo, a Vite Plus application, a Vite Plus library, or use a custom template. Now that Vite Plus has monorepo support, we stick with that, and we use vp demo as the package name. We can choose the agents, so AI straight away knows about Vite Plus from the get-go and which commands to use and not to use. Then we can also add our .vs Code folder for the editor, and eventually also set up pre-commit hooks, so there is no need for Husky or LinStage. That's also built into Vite Plus straight away. And then the monorepo is being created, and we jump into the project right in our editor. The first thing we want to do is running the dev server, of course, so we can run vp dev and then type in apps website, because that's where our website is in the monorepo structure, and the classic vdev server will start here. Switching over to the browser, we can see the new Vite 8 starter template here for TypeScript and Vite application. The count is as usual working through the button, and HMR also works as expected. But of course, we don't have to start a dev server through vp dev and then writing the folder. We can also straight away go into apps website and run vp dev there, and we will see the same result. But of course, that's not all. We have a lot of tasks and scripts that we can run in our application. For that, we can use vp run. And instead of taking a look at every package JSON, we can just run vp run without any arguments and see all the tasks in our project right away. Also group by package. Here we have dev prepare and ready at the root, and then for utils and for website, different tasks. We can go through them easily through arrow keys, but we can also type something, like we can type ubd, which is fuzzy search, and we get utils build, which we can then straight away run by hitting enter. But that's not all that vp run can do. We can actually run the same command, utils -build, but with caching enabled by using --cache. You can of course also configure that if you need something like end variables that affect the whole caching. Now, if we run it again, we see, okay, obviously no cache hit, it ran for the first time. But if we run it again, we see, okay, perfect. 500 milliseconds saved, no problem, the cache hit, and we're doing the replay. If we now change a file in the utils package, like the index.ts, and say, hello friends, and add another exclamation mark, and run the same command, there's a cache miss, and we run the same command again. Now, if we do it again, of course, the cache is hit. And the cache is actually smart enough to infer input. So if we now change, let's say, the counter TS in our website and say counter starts at 1, and we run the same command, the cache is still there and being hit because the utils, they didn't change. But of course, building is one thing. What we want to do is also catch errors early on. Formatting, linting, type errors, you name it. For that, let's introduce something and say const a equals 2, and let's say a is actually a number, which obviously is not fully correct. Now we can run the vp check command, and this will check the whole repository. Here we see, first of all, a formatting issue is found. Yeah, semicolon. Let's run vp check fix, and this is fixed right away. But now, obviously, we still have a type error here, and this is reported correctly. So we get the info here, what's wrong, and we can, for example, add an @ts ignore and run the command again, and we should be good to go. Now only the linter is complaining, saying that, well, a is unused, so we use _a, run the same thing again, and voila, no more errors, and we're good. Oh, and of course we know that you can't start on a greenfield all the time. Actually, rarely. That's why we created vp migrate. So if you have an old project that's based on some of the tooling already, no problem, you can use it to eventually migrate over. So here we run vp migrate, we can do the same selections as before, and now we have the option to migrate ESLint rules over to auxlint, for example. Let's skip that for here. There will be still a few things happening, like imports being rewritten, and then the project is ready for Vite Plus. Keep in mind that you need Vite 8 and Vitest 4.1 if you used Vitest before to migrate over. If you're not on these versions, then migrate over there first. And also, most projects might need some manual adjustments depending on the tools and your workflow that you've had before. You can also find more information about the migration flow, the recommended workflow, and migration prompts plus other help over at vplus.dev in our migration guide. Now that we talked about tooling, let's talk about vpenv, because vpress can also manage your Node.js version and your package manager. For that, we can run vpenv, which is enabled by default, and we can check what the current vpenv is set up to. Here we see by default, we have LTS up and ready, version 24 at the time of recording, and we can also pin certain projects to certain versions. So here we can say vpenv pin and then say 25, for example. So now the project that has been migrated before is using node version 25 now. We can double check that by using vp env which node to check that, and we see that's correct, 25.8. If we now go to the main programming folder, we can do the same thing and run vp env which node. Here we will see we will default to 24 again. So Vite will make sure that it doesn't come to these "it works on my machine" issues anymore, at least regarding to runtime and package manager. And that concludes the basic Vite feature overview. Of course, there's always more to learn, so take a look at our docs at viteplus.dev, join our Discord to connect and chat with us, and if you have a feature request or bug report, then drop that in our GitHub repository. And now, let's build things together.